Hey there, Sheryl here. Today is an extremely special day. I'm so honored to be here with the amazing Gina Tesla, VP Sustainability and Social Impact at Coupa Software. Gina, thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Oh, Sheryl, it's such a pleasure. I've really been looking forward to this. Thank you.
I can't wait for you to share some of your wisdom on this really important topic. But before we get into it, I would love to know, how did you get interested in, working for a software company? How did you get interested in working for sustainability and impact, social impact? And then, were there any road bumps along the way, or was it smooth sailing?
Well, thanks so much, Sheryl, again, for this opportunity to talk with you and to share some thoughts, and I'm sure learn from you along the way for sure. It was definitely not smooth sailing, very much circuitous routes. I think if you look at it now, it kind of all makes sense, but there were many different paths that I took to lead me to where I am today. And I think fundamentally, it's a search for purpose, really thinking about, why am I here? What's the biggest impact that I can make? And just sort of having an insatiable appetite for making a difference and just wanting to, I'm a very goal-oriented person, and I can't quite take it out of me even when I try to. So I don't think I would have ever known that I would have ended up here. But I'll tell you, there was a turning point for me when I started thinking about, I was much younger, and I was doing really well. And I started thinking about service sort of out of the blue, truly. And that manifested itself as ultimately becoming a Peace Corps volunteer. And many Peace Corps volunteers have an uncle, aunt, mother, father, whatever, who was a Peace Corps volunteer. And for me, I didn't know anyone. But it really, the driver for me was thinking about, fundamentally, what is it that I can do to achieve the maximum? And we just got a delivery. Yes, Autumn likes to be part of my conversations. So, really wanting to kind of find my purpose, and I took many different paths to get here.
Yeah, and was there anything, a lot of times, at least it's happened in history, when anything amazing's happened, sometimes there's road bumps along the way. So was there ever a time when something happened or when you doubted yourself, but you just kind of kept going or went for it anyway?
Oh, many times. And I will say that, and nobody wants to hear this when they're going through it, but I will say that really it was through times of loss or struggle where I grew the most, the times when I thought there's no way that I can make it through. So for example, when I finally made my way to Panama as a Peace Corps volunteer, I was within my first 3 months of training in country, and I arrived, and we literally had to drive through a garbage dump to get to my host family's site.
Oh my gosh.
And there were just many other things that were going on, a lot of climate shock. And so there was a moment when I thought, like, there's no way, get me out of here. There's no way that I can do this. Nobody knows why I'm here. I don't know why I'm here. What on earth am I going to do? And we were kind of talking about this in a different vein, but I did reach out. And in this case, I reached out to my dad, and my parents really thought I was nuts for doing the whole thing. And I thought he would be like, come home. And he was like, no, of course you can do it. And it was just a moment for me that I'll never forget, because that was really all I needed to hear, to know that somebody believed in me, that I could make it through. There were other times, for example, when we think about this specific career around what some people call corporate social responsibility or sustainability. When I first was working at IBM, I started off as an internal consultant and within our services practice. And a position opened up within what was called corporate citizenship. And I wanted that job so badly. And I was blocked. I was like actively blocked. And I reached out. I reached out. There was a VP who said to me, like, no, this is the job that you should have. You shouldn't be blocked. And she believed in me, and she really, helped me lay a path to get the support that I needed to be able to move into that role. So that was another time where, I was able to, based on, I didn't walk into the job as highly competitive, but based on my experience and based on the true, very overused word, passion, but really my authentic desire to really work in this space and contribute what I had learned in other experiences really rang through. So because I received that support, I was able to ultimately make it into the role, which really changed my life.
Yeah, and I just want to pause there for a moment because it's really along the lines of what we're going to be talking about, the first step to unlocking your limitless leadership. And that sometimes, we are inspired by our gut or our heart or a combination of both, but then we talk ourselves out of it, like, I don't have experience, or I haven't, especially women, as you probably know, are notorious for, not having checked enough of the boxes. And of course, if we run up against a roadblock. So I just wanted to spotlight that you listen to that voice, you listen to your heart or your gut or that inner calling or whatever, or the universe or whatever you want to call it. And then you got some help. And I think that's super valuable to point out. It's important for you to do, but also you had someone step in to champion you. And that's more than having a mentor. It's really having a sponsor.
That's
someone
right.
who, believes in you maybe when you don't believe in yourself enough. And I think that proactivity on both ends, on your end, is saying, hey, I want this and I'm going for it, even if, I stumble, or even if it's not easy. And then, being proactive about finding someone who is going to not just support you, but help pave a way. I think of it as, if you're walking through the Amazon, someone who has a machete in front of you saying, we're coming through, I'm going to cut the path.
That's right.
So I think that's really important. And so did that eventually help you get your role at Coupa?
Well, all of these things, ultimately, those were things that happened much earlier in my career. And I spent a long time in that role that I was talking about. And I truly, truly loved that role, and the team that I built and the work that we were able to do, and the support that I received from the leadership there was amazing. And I moved around a little bit, moved from the East Coast to the West Coast. And then eventually, Coupa came knocking on my door, and it just was a fantastic opportunity for me to start at a company really with a much, I worked for very large enterprises, which are very well established. And so to have the opportunity to come and work for a company that's much earlier in its life cycle is really exciting.
Yeah. So, of course, we have to talk about mindset because it's just the world that I live in. And I would love to know, for any emerging leaders or even senior leaders, because as we know, fear and doubt come in with any next level. And so, do you have any advice for what mindset, or can you share the mindset that's really allowed you to really ascend in your role?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just really want to be vulnerable and say that it's not a mindset that I carry with me every single day, but it's been in those, really important moments. And it is something that that's sort of just a part of who I am. But I also want to just put it out there that we all have days when we are doubting, or frustrated, or just tired. So I think that the mindset for me, something that stuck with me, and we were talking about this earlier, but something that stuck with me was, my mom would talk about sort of before you have a test the next day, like, before you go to sleep, like visualize yourself doing really well on that test, like visualize what's going to happen. And we were talking about that as it relates to sports and athletes. And that is something that I think is a really important tool because it helps me focus. So instead of being, whether it's a large speaking engagement, a really important presentation, instead of being like really distracted and thinking about all the things that can go wrong, I think it's more important to sort of try to push that away and say, okay, I have this energy that I'm trying to balance right now. It's a little overwhelming. Well, use that as a tool to say to yourself, okay, I'm going to visualize how this meeting is going to go. I'm going to visualize at the end how happy I feel or how proud others might feel of me or how I feel like I really did a good job. And this is where I'm saying, it's not perfect. Sometimes there is doubt that sneaks in and says, oh, the whole thing blows up, kind of. And it's like, no, I'm not going to go there. Like, I'm really just going to focus on this being a successful outcome.
Yeah, and first of all, your mom and I would have gotten along famously because she was really like coaching you through some of the same tools and strategies that world-class athletes and Olympians use. And, not to throw us women under the bus all at the same time, but we're pretty famous catastrophizers, if that's a word. And I think most of us are guilty, even myself, even though I know what I know. So just for anyone listening to listen to what Gina said and think about how you want it to turn out. And then if I could just take it a step further, think of 2 controllables that you can practice or work on to make it happen. So I am so glad that you brought that up. Now, I want you to, we talked about earlier, really the importance of having women in leadership and having them ascend in their leadership and truly becoming limitless leaders. Yeah. And so, we also talked about breaking it down because when things get most women, first of all, have very complicated lives. In other words, they're working. And, the reality is most of the time, and I have some pretty good research to back me up, that they are planning the vacations, that they are, taking care of the family. And they, if they're lucky enough to have a partner, that's amazing. But chances are a lot of these responsibilities fall on one person. And so we thought it would be really beneficial to break it down and talk about what is the first step to becoming a limitless leader. So I would like you to share your thoughts on that bite-sized chunk so women can really lean into their highest sense of leadership, quite honestly, when it's never been needed more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and I couldn't agree with you more, especially working from home. Working from home is a blessing. And for those of us who have the privilege to be able to work from home, especially through COVID, I have immense gratitude for it. And being a mother of 2 12-year-olds, it is incredibly beneficial. But the downside is that I live and work in my home. And whether I'm working for Coupa or I'm working for my family, I'm working 100% of the time. I don't really ever have downtime. I don't really ever sit on my couch because I am constantly doing something for somebody. I'm constantly laboring. So
some you're getting paid for, some you're not.
Exactly. So I just want to put that out there because I think it's important for us to talk about that and for allies to understand that, anything that you can do to take a little thing off of somebody, any one thing you can take off of somebody's plate is very beneficial. But I think on the other hand, we've heard this before, it also makes you incredibly efficient because you just don't have any time for wasting time in meetings or nonsense or, going back and forth in emails. Like, you really need to be quite succinct and get to the point. And that's an important part of leadership as well. But I think sort of getting back to the frame that we were talking about before, I think it's simply, it's first step is visualizing that for yourself, right? And you take the time for yourself, take a breath, get your body in more of a receptive state and say to yourself, I can really see myself in this role, whether it's a promotion, whether it's presenting in a meeting, whatever that sort of next step is for you from a leadership perspective, I think the first part is to really give yourself that permission to pause and to visualize it. And then we also talked about voicing it. There's, you can take a micro step to that. And perhaps if you're not comfortable talking to someone, maybe you could write it in a journal. And that's like a next step. But then take another step to someone who you're comfortable with and say, look, this is something that I want to do. And then you'll hear yourself talking about it. So I think that those are some of the first steps that you can take. And then the second steps I would take are to really speak up. I think, and I've seen and I've experienced myself, where I think sort of ingrained in our culture is that if you just put your head down and work hard enough, somebody's going to recognize you. And that's really just not the case. And that's not my experience. And you really need to speak up for yourself. And you really need, and that's hard. And that takes a lot of courage. And sometimes it's because I've been pushed to the point where, frankly, I'm pretty pissed off about something, but you can use that energy as fuel to say, no, this isn't right. This is what I deserve. This is what I'm providing. This is what I deserve. And so I think that's also another step, is to visualize it, practice it, and then vocalize it. And don't expect that you're just going to be patted on the back and recognized because you're putting in the hard work. It just won't happen.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate what you just said, is that even despite what we've been told or what we witnessed growing up or what have you, your work does not speak for itself. We also talked about before we went live is that many times women in the workplace, especially women who might be further marginalized within our gender, women get overlooked, not because anyone's intentionally doing it, but we're less visible because our male counterparts are more vocal. And so I really am 100% on board with what you were saying. So important. And so is there any, along these lines, is there a call to action? We talked about a couple different things, but if there's, either a woman, a female leader, emerging leader watching, or a male ally, is there, like we were talking about, a micro step to really unlocking their leadership so they can be truly limitless? In other words, to talk about passion and purpose, where they can really tap into their passion and purpose and give fully and feel the joy that comes along with doing that. What's really the first step?
There's so much richness in what you, Sheryl, there's so much within there. I think it's to, first of all, be honest with yourself about what your purpose is and to believe in it. And to not let all the other things get in the way and the distractions. And that can also include, and this may sound like this comes from a place of privilege, but to also not get so caught up in what's going to happen in the short term. Because if you are doing something that you're truly passionate about and you're living your purpose, I firmly believe that the financial aspects of it will come along. And so that's also something that people can get really caught up in. So the first step, I think, is to figure out really what's your purpose, to visualize it, to talk to somebody else about it. And then a second step would be, what are some of the barriers that you can ask for help with in terms of someone either, like we talked about, actively sponsoring you, or is there, a barrier within your personal life? Can you ask for help? Can you just make it happen? Can you say, I'm going to pay for this help so that I can go and live my purpose and do the thing that I need to do? So I realize those are all like many different types of things. But those are some of the things that have worked for me.
Yes, 100%. And I want to just throw in there, it's so important that you said ask for help. It's just really being proactive. And I even want to shine some light on maybe even ask someone for help you would think never in a million years would help you. So when you're thinking of who to ask, think about who can be most helpful, but also how can it be a win-win? Because even if you're more junior, you have a different perspective and a value add, and how can you prepare? But, the old saying goes, the worst that they could say is no. So be
Right.
bold in the ask, and make sure that you're prepared. So it's well worth their time, of course. So those things were so, so important, Gina, and I am so grateful for your time today to share your wisdom. It's been so exciting following you. I look forward to continuing to follow all of your success, and thanks for being here. I look forward to following your journey.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I wish everybody out there the best.